We have before us a bill to turn government spending onto autopilot, actually to give the executive branch the ability to turn government spending onto autopilot. I listened closely to the interaction that Senator Pratt had here with Senator Marty. I'm wondering if Senator Marty would yield again. Mr.
Senator Marty, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Drazkowski.
So, Senator Marty, I'm reading the bill, and it modifies existing law in Chapter 16A.102, Subdivision B. And the way the law writes, and you're amending it to add the rate of inflation, the application of inflation into it, but the way the law reads is it says that the executive branch must simply inform the leaders in the legislature in the budgeting area. So the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, both the minority and majority, must be told what the executive branch believes the inflation is and how it's applied and if it's applied correctly. And in the law, they will, with this bill, have to do that at two different points in time. Now, my question, Mr. President and Senator Marty, is what is the recourse under your bill, Senator Marty, around the addition of inflation and the application of it? What is the recourse that the legislative branch will have under this newly formed or amended law? What recourse will we have if we disagree with the executive branch in their calculation and application of the new autopilot increase that your bill is going to provide to government spending?
Senator Marty.
Mr. President, first of all, the bill does not put any spending on autopilot. The one thing I will remind you of is that this second paragraph where they are required to consult with us and make sure there's sort of agreement on how they're calculating the numbers, there's no change in that. And bottom line, again, this is a forecast. You might disagree with the weather forecast. You can argue with it. You can say they're really incompetent weather forecasters. You can do whatever you want with it, but it's their forecast. You don't have to listen to the forecast. You can ignore it. You can say, we're going to don't need coats or anything this week. We'll be fine. You can do whatever you want. It's not a question of doing anything more than saying, you're saying, well, what if we disagree with the forecast and the way they're doing it? Well, you can say you disagree with it. It doesn't change anything we do here other than making sure we have the most accurate forecast we can get.
Senator Marty, I just want to remind you that we have two meteorologists that we really do believe in, so I just want to make sure that you're clear about that. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm signing up to be the third in an area that doesn't have to do with weather, if we would here. Mr. President, this does put government spending on autopilot. And Senator Marty, I understand what you're saying, but the reality is, Senator Marty, members, Mr. President, that this law directs the executive branch on how to develop the state's budget forecast. We are amending it and simply telling the executive branch all they have to do in applying this new autopilot increase to spending on state government in the forecast, all they have to do is notify us. There is no recourse for the legislative branch. We are handing them, Mr. President, all of this power, all of this authority, and all of this discretion without any recourse on our end. What in the separation of powers, Mr. President, in our state government, what interest do we have in simply conveying to the executive branch that type of power? Why would we do that, Mr. President? We are putting government spending and its calculations on autopilot increase. And Senator Marty, I understand what you said, but the reality is once the forecast comes out, both in November and the one that's going to be coming at the end of this month, once it comes out, it has a great amount of influence on what the people of Minnesota understand the spending to be. So if you show the people of Minnesota, Mr. President, the number, the way it's calculated now, before we go in and amend it and put an autopilot increase in it in the budget forecast, that's going to be a sharp contrast from the autopilot increase amount that comes out. And we have to be honest with the people of Minnesota here. We, the legislative branch, the members of the state Senate, who the people of Minnesota sent us here to fulfill the constitutional autonomy that we have in the Constitution's separation of powers, in this bill are conveying to the executive branch power that is in no interest of this branch as we represent those people who sent us here. We have one chief executive over there in the executive branch, and I would submit, Mr. President, if the chief executive was from a different party, the party bringing this particular bill wouldn't have the type of interest in the way that this was written. We are not doing our constitutional duty under this law and protecting our separation of powers. Members, we have done this again and again in our history. We are making ourselves a weak legislature. This bill, as it's written, makes this legislature even weaker. Members, and Senator Marty, if you want to do this and put in, and I understand Democrats want to put government on autopilot increases each year. That's what this does. But if you want to do it, at least give this branch, this Senate, and that House over there the ability to have some recourse in that discussion. We are simply conveying it to the executive branch. This is not the right way to do it. Members, let's defeat this bill, and Senator Marty can bring back another one tomorrow or the next day that actually contemplates the rightful authority and responsibility of the Minnesota legislature in this discussion. Thank you, Mr. President.